Welcome to the Tepper School of Business Multimedia Series. For more information on the Tepper School at Carnegie Mellon, please visit us at www.tepper.cmu.edu/multimedia. And now, here's your selected video.
I think the first advice I have is actually to sitting CEOs. As far as my evaluation, diversity and inclusion is not something nice to do. It's something that we have to do in order to compete, in order to be able to access the talent that we have out there. And the approach needs to change from being focused on how women fit into the culture, into how does the culture need to change to be more open and more inclusive. And developing that sensitivity with existing management requires training, requires the sensibility to different ways, different styles, and obviously different cultural backgrounds of people to take advantage of what they bring. As to women, or for that matter men, my advice is quite similar as to what it takes to succeed. It is a combination of being able to fit in and to stand out. And to fit in has a lot to do with knowledge, with skills, but also an adjustment of style. And again, stand out is about knowledge, skills, and the willingness to push back on issues that are important, to express a point of view. So that's the general framework, and it is true for men and women. I do think we come in with our unique strength and challenges as men or women into the workplace, and as men or women with different cultural backgrounds. But it is a combination of learning to be demanding, saying what you want and what you need. And so it's demanding not just of yourself, but also of the person you work for and the organization. It is about perseverance, and perseverance is a tougher challenge for women than it is for men, in part because the pull from home is real, and in part because as a society we legitimize women opting out. So perseverance is a bigger challenge for women. It is about owning your own development and kind of evaluating how much you are learning every 6 to 12 months, kind of the shape of your learning curve. And finally, it is about confidence. It is about having the confidence or pretending when you don't have it. And confidence, the way you express it, the necessity of it is also gender and cultural based. So it is something that we need to learn if we are operating in this culture here in the US. I do see the role of CEOs changing, and I would say it is a mixture of wishful thinking and observations of what has led us to the position we are in. And I would say the most important characteristic that we need to see change on is the focus of the CEO on long term, on sustainable value creation. And sustainable value creation is about the long term. And it does require at times to sacrifice short-term profits in order to get to the sustainability. The second part of dimension of a CEO role of the future that I think needs to change is getting to a point of a much better partnership, public-private partnership. Companies operate with a license from society, and they owe at least the duty of care in return for that license. And the reality is that civil society, non-for-profit organizations, as we refer to them here, are very trusted by the public. CEOs have to regain that trust. And regaining that trust will require engagement. It is not about lip service. It is about substantive engagement with people that care about broader issues than the short-term bottom line of an employer. And finally, the third dimension I would mention about the necessity to change in a CEO role. It is a much more fundamental approach to acting local. So we all in global companies talk about what it means to think globally. We all have the cliche of acting local, but acting local requires profound new knowledge for CEOs acting out of the Western, Northern developed countries. The reality is that the Chinese economy today has surpassed that of Germany, is the third largest. We have 50% of the population living east of the Middle East. We have to be able to understand societies in which the separation of church and state and judiciary is not the one under which we operate today. We need to be able to approach many of these markets not as one more location relative to the home market, but actually try and reposition the business as a home business in those countries. And that is a change for most of the global businesses based in the Western developed countries. I do want to talk about the financial crisis. I have in the last few years been more of an outsider looking in, having been for most of my life an insider in corporate life. And as an outsider, I will make three observations. The first one is that ethics and values are much more than the letter of the law. And in the US, we have evolved into a system that has a religious belief in the rule of law, which is interpreted to be the letter of the law. The spirit of the law has become, in many ways, irrelevant. And I believe we need to come back to ethics and values when we make decisions, and not just abide by the letter of the law. The second observation I will make relative to the financial crisis is that free markets require intervention, require at least some level of oversight and regulation. It doesn't work to have free markets when we, the public, are expected to stand up behind too big to fail, or to stand up because a failure of a company would cause too many employees or an increase in unemployment that is unacceptable. So we have to have a system that is willing to evaluate how free markets are operating and deciding when and how to intervene. It is a huge challenge, and it is a challenge that I believe we have failed at leading into this particular crisis, in part again because free markets had become a religion, in part because we had taken an approach that basically invalidated any analysis that could lead us to intervention. And I think we have learned that that is not good enough. Can we get to a system of regulation that is more sensitive and aware of the dichotomy between incentives to operate for your narrow good versus the public good? That is a big challenge, to make regulations incentives compatible or aware of where that conflict arises is not a simple task. And finally, a comment about compensation. In my view, it is not so much about the level of compensation, but I will quote Judith Samuelson from the Aspen Institute, who has said that it is more about compensating for the wrong things as opposed to the level at which we compensate. And the reality is that we do need to focus on longer term value creation, as I had mentioned a moment ago, and we don't have good metrics for that. We don't have yet a good way to measure whether we are creating value in the long term. And we need to be able, as we move in that direction, to move away from just numbers into the shapes of curves, kind of a much longer term perspective. Again, the CEO for me is a steward of a much longer term enterprise of assets that have value that go quite a bit beyond his or her term as the chief executive officer. I think it's important for corporations to understand that social responsibility is much more than being able to donate for a good cause a certain percentage of your income, whether it's 0.1% of your profit or 1% of your profit. But social responsibility is a much broader context. And that social responsibility does necessitate coordination beyond just the realm of one company, and in many cases beyond national borders. So whether it's pandemics or whether it's environmental causes, again, the corporation of the future needs to be able to do better by doing better. You know, for students looking for a job, and I do view it as first looking for a job and then evolving it into a career. So for students looking for a job, I would say come prepared, do your homework, learn about the company that you are interviewing with. There is an expectation on the other side that you would know something about the business that you are coming to inquire about. The second thing I would say about interviews for jobs is come with a mindset, with an attitude that the person you'll be talking to is equal to you, not above you. Engage in a conversation as equals. That person may have more knowledge than you do, definitely relative to the company. But the more you are able to ask questions, to view it as one person talking to another, the better the interview will be. And the third one is show curiosity. It is extremely important to come in prepared with questions, to listen and ask, to want to learn. So it is not just a pro forma exercise. You are interviewing the other side, and you need to come with a mindset that says, I am not just being interviewed. Yes, you want the job, but you are also interviewing the company on what it is they do, what is their approach, what is their culture. Come with have at least one question that you really care to hear the answer, as opposed to just, again, a list of pro forma questions that you have. Beyond that, I would say to people as they walk into the workforce, you do need to watch for traps, not just for opportunities. And there are many traps. There are traps associated with conformity. There are traps associated with competition. And by competition, I mean what everybody else is doing, therefore I have to do it too. And there are traps associated with renaming bad things in a different way. So use your personal compass. And again, what you have to remember that what you're doing is taking a job. And if that is not the right job, you have the education, you have the skills to move on and develop from there a career.